Hi! In this short tutorial I would like to introduce you to render setup and render passes inside of MODO. Since the main intent of this tutorial is to be a very introductory tutorial that will just glance over most of the topics covered, if this topic interests you, you can find further information inside of the MODO's help system. To get to the help system, please go to the help section on top of the user interface, then choosing the inline help system, MODO will bring up a browser. From there choose shade, light and render, and you will be presented with topics related to the shading and lighting. When you launch MODO for the first time, you'll be presented with a modeling interface that is specifically designed to help you accomplish modeling related tasks effortlessly. But MODO features a user interface layout that is better suited for all rendering and shading related tasks. To get to that user interface layout, all you have to do is go to the upper section of the user interface and choose Render from the available tabs. Here you will be presented with the interface layout that has the tools and editors that can speed up your rendering and shading workflow greatly. As you will become more familiar with the application, you can start using hotkeys such as Ctrl-Tab to quickly switch between various MODO's layouts. Before we go ahead and start actually shading our scene, let's take a quick look over the user interface itself. The top left section of the user interface occupies a render preview window that is giving you interactive feedback about the shading changes in your scene. Below this viewport you can find a timeline with the standard playback tools and a 3D viewport for quick camera adjustments. If you would like to focus your work only on a certain portion of your shading workflow, you can quickly toggle any viewport full screen by pressing numpad 0 and then toggle it back quickly. Next to the 3D viewports you can find the two data lists that you will be using probably the most often throughout your shading process, namely the item list and the shade tree, responsible for most of the shading operations. Next to these two editors you can find a property list where you can adjust properties of your render items, shaders, also properties of individual items. Here you can also create render passes, adjust them, create them and delete them. Excellent, so now that we feel familiar with the user interface, let's finally get to the actual rendering. Cool, so when you're starting out a new scene, it is generally a good idea to quickly go ahead and adjust the scene to match whatever your final resolution and whatever your final output should be. So all of that can be achieved on the render item right here, and this is like the master container of your scene that contains all the properties of your scene, such as the frame resolution, also the animation length. Then you can find general settings and global illumination settings on the item as well. Here you can also choose the camera that will be used to render the scene. So just to demonstrate this, I can change the render resolution to whatever suits my needs. So now let's have a look at the settings section. You can think of these settings as a general quality settings related to the way your image will be converted to pixels. So anti-aliasing controls the overall quality of the tracing of your edges and textures, and for the previewing I recommend to reduce the quality to bare minimum so you get most of your preview, and the preview samples the image and traces the image faster this way. This can be of course changed for the final output to much higher number. The anti-aliasing filter controls the general smoothness of the image, and we'll get to the details of this a little bit further. And underneath you can find the general settings controlling the quality of anti-aliasing and noise. Essentially you can use them to remove noise from your pictures. Below that you have a control over the shadows and also how far your reflection and diffraction will be traced. Here you can also find the quality controls over quality of your subdivision surfaces, and as well your displacement settings. Right below the settings section you can find a global illumination tab that allows you to quickly turn on a global illumination to simulate light scattering and light bouncing throughout your scene, and you can achieve more realistic results this way. So if I enable this, you'll see I immediately get color. Before we saw only the reflections. MODO features two types of global illumination, and that is brute force, Monte Carlo, which will just shoot the direct rays, producing fast, quite accurate results, but you need quite a lot of rays to make it clean. So if you combine it with irradiance caching, this will generally produce quite soothing and quite good looking results right off the bat without actually adjusting too many settings. Great new addition to MODO 7.1 was the environment importance sampling that allows you to sample your environment at much higher accuracy, achieving realistic sharp shadows even from your HDRI maps. So now that we have a basic understanding of how MODO's rendering settings work and how to adjust their global illumination, let's have a look at MODO's pass system. In many cases they are referred to as render pass system, but in fact they are capable of much more. Passes in MODO are flexible and open system that allows you to capture a state of any channel inside of your scene and group them in a logical fashion, allowing you to create variations of any scene without generating additional overhead by managing multiple files to achieve a variety of results. Interesting to note is that each pass can contain quite a selection of channels on render time. But enough of talk, and let's have a look at a few examples of what can be achieved by adding passes to your workflow. So before we go ahead and start creating our own passes and new groups, I would like to use this simple scene to demonstrate the flexibility of the system. So if you look at this scene, it really contains very few objects: a cube, ground, one color texture, and then a group of passes called scene states, and passes themselves state 1, 2, and 3. This group also contains channels such as position X, visibility, and a few color channels, and then also the rotation for this cube object. And just by switching between passes 1, 2, and 3, or disabling them completely, I'm actually generating 3 completely different results within the same file. So this really allows you to manage your scenes much more effectively. So to demonstrate the power of passes on a slightly more production-ready example, I would like to use this image, and in this case I would like to create 2 passes, one for the mushroom and one for the snail, while they are still being affected by each other lighting-wise. So here I have a group called element passes, and that group contains channels called visible to camera. They are coming from each appropriate group shader, item shader. And now when I turn on the character pass, you'll see the mushroom will turn off, as will the visible to camera property on the mushroom. And if I switch this to the mushroom part, I will get only the render of the mushroom, and still the lighting and shadowing from the snail is still visible. Now that we have a basic understanding of what passes can do, let's go ahead and create some. So let's first start by creating a group, and let's call this color. And inside of this group I will create 2 passes. First one will be my variation 01, and let's create another one, variation 02. And here they are, but they are still empty. They are not controlling any channels. So my variation or pass, I will turn on the auto add that will allow me to automatically pick the channels that will be associated with the passes. And to add some channels, I need to enable or cause some change to the scene. So let's go ahead and enable this layer or this texture, and if I hit apply, you'll see that the enable channel will be added to the group and will be controlled by the pass variation 01. If I switch back, the enable will turn off again. So now if I enable the other color variation and hit apply, it will be automatically added to the system because of this auto add button. And now I have 2 passes with 2 different variations. Awesome. So once you're actually ready to render your beautiful imagery in passes, go to the render menu and choose render passes from the drop down, then choose the group that you would like to render and press OK. MODO will go ahead and render all passes one by one. And once it's done, you will have not only access to individual passes, but also to the channels that MODO generated per each pass. So you can happily compose it away inside of Nuke. All of this image data, of course, can be saved out either as individual images or multi-layered EXRs. Excellent! So we successfully gone through the basic render setting inside of MODO. Of course, there is much more that you can explore, techniques and settings that speed up your renders. In this case, I would like to recommend you a great rendering and shading tutorials by Richard Riords from Luxology website. So here we go. Hope you enjoyed the video and you can clearly see how MODO's path system is a robust way how you can manage your scenes and shading variations for either creative exploration or creation of elements for compositing, and also how passes can cut down the number of files you have to manage in your production at any point. In the next part of the tutorial, we'll have a look at cameras, lights and shaders, and also we'll prepare your scenes for multi-channel output for further compositing in applications such as Nuke. So have fun modeling!